Yes, thank you once again for joining us on Book Chart with Anna Monardo. And you need to know a little bit about Anna Monardo. She's a professor at the University of Nebraska in Omaha. She was born in Pittsburgh, spent many years in New York City, and now lives in Omaha, Nebraska. When she teaches or where she teaches at the workshop of Writers Workshop of University of Nebraska, Omaha. She's written a number of novels, but there's one in particular that is of interest to us today. And the one that we're going to talk about, it's called After Italy, a family memoir of arranged marriage. And this has appeared in creative nonfiction and so many other important journals have serialized it. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Anna Monardo. Anna, you're welcome to Book Chat.
Hello, thank you, Cole. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Good. Now, let's just get straight to it.
Yes.
Please tell us the story behind the book. Why did you decide to write and publish such a book with such an interesting title?
Thank you. Well, I'm glad you liked the title. That was difficult to come to decide on the title. You know, the memoirist Vivian Gornick says that writers have one story to tell. I don't know if that's true for all writers, but in a way, it is true for me. I've been preparing to write or writing my family's immigration story, I feel like most of my life. I first tried to tell this story as a novel that was published in 1993. It's called The Courtyard of Dreams. I worked on that a long time. Um, and after it was published, a few years passed, and I felt that there were a lot of aspects of our family story that I had not told.
Hmm.
And that's what inspired me to pick up the story again and try to retell it in a different format, to tell it as a memoir. Um, I think there were a few things that happened. I was a bit older, and more important, I had more information about the family. I hadn't been able to tell the whole story in the novel because I didn't yet know the full story. And the memoir allowed me to do that, to dig into the family's story more deeply, to find the research references I needed, resources, to interview family members. To much of this story, the main part of it happens against the landscape of World War II in Italy, and then after that war. And so there was a lot of research I had to do about that period. So those are some of the reasons that I came about with this book. But I did work on it for about 14 years.
One for 14 years.
14, yeah.
Okay, good. Well, first, before we go further down, what does the in after Italy? What does it signify? Sometimes we say postmodernist, post-independence. Is this something like post-Italy,
I
or
like
what
that.
is the after in the Italy?
I like what you said. It's somewhat like that. Um, I wanted to signal that I was going to be digging into the family immigration story most deeply in the part that happens after the family left Italy and arrived in America. So there's the background story that's set in Italy and a lot of references to that, but I wanted to tell what happened after they left Italy, um, after the influences of living there.
Okay, I see. Now, I mean, for any curious person like myself, would want to know what was the most challenging aspect of researching and writing this book, given its deeply personal and potentially sensitive subject matter.
Right. Right. Part of the family story, well, it's you can see it in the subtitle. Both my maternal grandparents and my parents had arranged marriages that were meant to facilitate immigration. So that was in place to begin with. And were those successful marriages? It's hard to say. But interpersonal difficulties came about in the aftermath. There was a dowry, there was a falling out over the dowry. These are old world customs that were brought into the new world. And so I grew up in a family that felt very happy and very whole, except there was this sort of marginal area where there was stress that was not quite defined. There was tension between my parents and between my father and my maternal grandparents, and I never knew what that was about. And so finding out what happened uh, among these people that I loved dearly and who raised me was difficult, emotionally difficult, and difficult to find the information because no one wanted to talk about it. I did have a diary that my mother kept during the early 5 years of my parents' marriage when, for various reasons, mostly having to do with his career, they were separated, and she kept a diary and left it for me, and it's full of emotionally difficult information, and I did not want to read that diary. I kind of had to force myself to. So, and it was tiny handwriting. So I needed a magnifying glass. And I set myself the task. I spent a whole week doing nothing but reading that. And I learned a lot. That was difficult. Also, on my father's side, he lived in Italy until he was 30. My mother came to America when she was 6 years old in time to begin school. Um, my dad was born in 1920, and Mussolini came into power in 1922. So fascism was the backdrop of his childhood and his young adulthood, which meant he was required to have a membership card to the fascist youth organization. And seeing cards like that, the actual thing with a young boy's signature on there. Um, that was very powerful, very powerful.
Well, someone said memoir writing can be emotionally challenging. You've talked about the physical challenge of actually getting the materials together using magnifying glasses. You know, the fact that you also use glasses and now you have to layer that with a magnifying glass.
Right.
That aside of the physical aspect is also emotionally challenging.
Hmm.
What were the most rewarding, apart from holding that or seeing your father's card? And what are the difficult aspects of revisiting your family's history? And how did this journey impact your understanding of Italy itself and how, for the personal, speaks to the political?
Right. Well, one beautiful thing that happened while I was working on this book, and for most of the time I was working on it, my father was deceased. Um, he was deceased before I began working on it, and my mom was alive for some of that time, but then she was also gone. So when I really immersed myself in this material, I felt close to them, and that was beautiful. And I still feel close to them through this book. Um, so that, and then also I found answers to questions that I'd carried with me for many years about, like I said, those emotional stresses in the family that were felt, that were palpable, and that were not talked about. And so it's always a relief when you get information, even if it's bad information, even if it's uncomfortable information, it's always good to find out the truth. So there's the relief of that. Um, the most rewarding, I would say, was learning more deeply the backgrounds, the worlds they came from, particularly my dad, what it meant to be living in Italy during fascism. He was a medical student in Naples, which was heavily bombed. Uh, he and everybody else in Naples living in famine conditions. He was also a conscript in the Italian army. He had no choice. And so all the personal documents I have of his university records, his university documents, his military documents, um, I I came to appreciate what he had gone through and to understand more deeply why he came here, what he was seeking out. Um, yeah, I always had that question. Why did my father come here? Because especially I was lucky enough to go back to Italy as a child now and then, and I got to know our family there, my dad's siblings, his mom, and he was deeply, deeply loved, and he had a life there. And I always wondered why did he leave all this? Why did he leave all this? And then I learned about the war, and I understood um,
Hmm.
more deeply why.
Well, you're still on to Book Chat with Anna Monardo, and she's discussing her book After Italy. Now, we've learned quite something about your family, about the history of Italy. The book explores themes of cultural identity and tradition. How did your own Italian American upbringing influence the way you view and portray these traditions, especially the main theme of arranged marriage?
I was the first in the family born in America, and I always knew I was American and I was planted here. And yet I grew up in a household that was largely informed by Southern Italian, Calabrian traditions and culture. And I embraced both, and yet there was a tension between them. Um, and as I got older, particularly as I became a teenager and I wanted more freedoms, and I was a teenager in the late 60s and early 70s. And so the general culture was telling me that I was entitled to a lot of personal freedom and that my personal growth was important. You know, as my dad grew up in fascism, personal growth wasn't really a priority. And so my father and I had a lot of conflicts in terms of just not understanding what the other was going after. And wherever you have conflict, you have story. And so that dynamic was both there was a lot of conflict within me in that I both embraced and very much loved my Calabrian family and our traditions, while at the same time feeling I wanted and needed to have distance from it. And there are some ways in which that conflict has never been completely resolved. I think I carry that with me um, to this time, and that's okay. It feels for the most part, it feels like a rich dynamic.
Mm. I don't know whether you've ever heard that Italians and some parts of Africa share similar traditions. You know,
Yes,
the tradition of arranged marriage with the Yoruba people is very, very common. You
yes.
talked about dowry the other time. Do Americans also pay dowry or bride price? So, uh, do you, now that you're a grown-up woman, a professor, do you ever see that comparative tradition in some parts of Africa and with what you have set down?
Oh, I love when I learn what I learned from African culture. I have a Nigerian friend, and also what I've learned from um, African literature, contemporary literature about arranged marriage and bride price. because there was no place to turn for that information in the American culture I was growing up in, American literature. So yes, I very much feel a connection and am grateful for that connection. Um, the arranged marriage is such a complicated topic to get into. Um, there's so many ways to approach it. In general, the idea, in general, I came to understand that to some degree, all marriages are arranged marriages.
Mm,
Um, each party has some idea of what they would like to happen in this coupling. And what I there was a conflict between my parents, I believe, because my mom, everybody knew about the arranged marriage tradition, but my mom, I don't think, fully got it. She was an 18-year-old girl who'd grown up in America, um, informed by Hollywood movies, and though when they met, there was an attraction between my parents. For my father, it wasn't a love match at first. It was a response. It was his duty to his family to marry.
mm,
The goal was for him to be able to immigrate more easily if he married an American citizen, establish his career, and so send help back to his family. He was head of family for seven siblings and their mother after their father died unexpectedly. So he didn't have, again, the luxury of thinking about self-fulfillment or a love match. He was primarily trying to help his family. And you can understand from the American culture that this would be um, somewhat of an insult to an American girl who thought she was walking into a love match. So I thought it was a very sad um, misunderstanding. It's a culture clash.
mm,
And that's where I felt that culture clash between my parents, two well-intentioned, loving people, that the microcosm of their story is where our story speaks to the larger, timeless discussion of migration, which has
mm.
been going on for all times and will continue to do so. I think, and there are many cultures, African, also Indian,
Yes.
that in which arranged marriage is still a practice. And I know people for whom, and I've read about stories in which the arranged marriage has very positive results. I think it can when both parties are very clear on what is going on. I think an arranged marriage, even for immigration purposes or practical purposes, utilitarian purposes, where it is not a love match, that can work if both
Mm.
parties are very clear up front about why they are entering and what their expectations are. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, there are many aspects of marriage, the transactional,
Mhm.
the spiritual components, the physical, the intellectual. It's a place where all of these are buried, and it now depends on how you go about it. And because there are so many tributaries to this, one would like to know, as a teacher of creative writing, would you say your understanding of your family's history changed significantly as you wrote this book? If so, how?
Oh, yes. Just spending time with my family for during those 14 years in so many different formats. In person, I went to Italy and interviewed family members. I spent time with those papers that I've already mentioned. I spent a lot of time with photographs. Um, so um, I, I, I felt very alive in that world as I was working on this book. So what I brought to the classroom was urging my students to really allow themselves to slide deeply into their research
Mm,
and to allow themselves to go into where there is discomfort. the place where we want to turn away, like I, with my mom's diary, very much wanted to put that in a drawer and leave it. And to do these projects, if we really want to or feel we need to go where the discomfort is. At the same time, there's absolutely no need to do this unless you feel a pressing, something pressing in you to get at that story. Then you know it's personal information that you need for yourself.
Hmm. Well, like we always say, we wish to just continue to talk and talk with you, or even possible to read an excerpt that you love the most. But because of time, I would like to ask you to talk a little bit more, because you've already mentioned it. Arranged marriage remains a topic of debate in many cultures, like we've said, the Yoruba culture, the Indian, and
Mm-hmm.
so many other cultures where we have what we call the middle person that actually goes and will research into families and matchmake. All
Right,
that has been superseded by Yahoo Personal,
right,
eHarmony, and
right,
all the other dating sites that
right,
try to
right,
use algorithm to match people. I don't know how
right.
well those modern middlemen have worked, but how do you think your book has contributed to the ongoing conversation about tradition versus modernity? And what do you hope it adds to the broader dialogue about love and relationship?
Those are good questions, Cole. What has been really wonderful as I've been going around since last May, reading from the book and talking to people about the book, is how many people tell me afterwards their own family stories, which I feel is an honor when someone will open up and give you that. And so many people have told me, oh, that was an aspect of my family, or oh, that was something that happened in my family but wasn't discussed. And so that's been a lovely thing. If my story can get people to think about their own family stories, then I'm very happy. I'm fascinated by family. You probably can tell that by now. All my books are in one way or another about family and the self. And I think one of the things with arranged marriage is that if it's a culture where that tradition is well known, then it can work well. But a family oriented coupling or marriage in in a situation where one party or both is also very concerned for their self identity and their personal growth, then there's an interesting um, clash of goals, basically, of goals. Because typically these traditions, like yours, like mine, where there's arranged marriage, it's family that it's not two people brought together, it's families brought together. And that's a beautiful thing if everyone is in agreement about that. And so it's very interesting to me to look in on another culture and even the one I was raised in, to see what is the relationship between the importance of family, identity with the family, and identity of the self.
Mm.
That relationship, that and it's a dynamic. And I've found I had to struggle with that and come to some kind of understanding of that for myself.
Well, I'm tempted to ask you, who have you found out is Anna Monardo? Who is she?
Someone who loves talking about these topics that you've brought up, that has been another great thing about the book is that it's given me an opportunity to talk about family and life choices and marriage and family, raising children, which are topics that just endlessly fascinate me. Um, so
Are you just going to say that Anna is a very curious being?
I'm going to say that. I like that.
Very
That's good.
curious, wanting to know, but specific about things. There's existential questions. Who are we? What are we? Why are we here? And all. But just to wrap this up cleanly,
Yes.
um, as somebody in the academy, where do you look? Where do you think your book will sit more with? Would it be in creative writing, or do you think students learning the Italian language might find it useful? Where do you think this can sit
Oh,
uh,
that's a,
in some of the classes?
I hope in many classrooms, I'd be honored if it were. Um, Certainly in creative writing. And my first novel, the one I mentioned as we were talking, The Courtyard of Dreams, is going to be reissued this May by the same publisher, Bordighera Press, which publishes books of the Italian diaspora. And to my mind, those books sit together. The novel, which addressed the family story as fiction, and After Italy, this memoir, which addresses the family story um, as factual information. So my books have been used in classrooms um, of students, first generation college students, in scholarship programs that have special classes for students who are just beginning college and they are the first in their families to do so because it raises questions of personal identity, personal goal definition. It has been used in language classes, Italian language classes. Um, so, yes, across the whole spectrum that you mentioned, I think there's a place. I hope there is.
Good. Well, this has been Book Chat with Anna Monardo. And what else can anybody add to it? Please, if you can get a copy of the book, go get a copy of the book. And I have read snippets of it, and I'm sure it's like kicking you right into another family. And as you know, nobody chooses their family, but you can choose your friend, but you can't choose your family. And
Yeah.
it's a high ground. It's a place of conflicts, of love, of friendship, of everything you can think of. And like I always say, if you learn how to negotiate within your family, you'll be a fantastic negotiator in life. You know how to balance love with ignorance, with being ignored or hate or any of those. And on that note, I would like to say a very big thank you to Anna Monardo for taking the time to talk to us about the book. Until another time when we come your way, I remain yours sincerely, Kole, saying keep on learning everywhere. Thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you, Cole. Thank you. I've enjoyed talking with you.